This is the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast, episode 709, How to Improve Google Classroom and Remote Learning Experiences with Kasey Bell. Welcome to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast, where you'll discover ways to become a more remarkable teacher today. Your host is author, educator, speaker, and mom, the Cool Cat teacher, Vicki Davis. Teaching online is challenging. In this show, we talk about the best practices to re-engage students, plus we'll talk about the common mistakes districts are making and the importance of being a teacher in such a time as this. You'll find this show encouraging, challenging, and relevant to right now, and you'll get some new ideas. Today's guest is Kasey Bell, award-winning digital learning coach at Up Learning. She is the author of Blended Learning with Google, Google A to Z, and host of the Up Learning Show podcast, and co-host of the Google Teacher Podcast. Enjoy!
Today's sponsor is Hapara, the company that has helped my school make more out of Google Classroom. Stay tuned at the end of the show to learn how Hapara can help your teachers, students, and administrators reach and engage more students. So today we're talking with my wonderful friend, Kasey Bell. She's got 2 books coming out this fall 2020. Blended Learning with Google and Google from A to Z. Now, when I wanted to get my Google Level 1 certification, and now I'm progressing on my others, Kasey Bell's course is what I went to and also what I went to for all of the teachers at my school. And we had 19 Level 1 certified teachers in a month. That was quite an undertaking, Kasey, but we really appreciate your course. We just couldn't have done it without you.
That is fantastic news. I am so glad that those courses helped, and I hope that those skills, more importantly, are helping teachers right now.
Well, they are for us. We are Google Classroom, but I know I've watched what you've been talking about and sharing, and we are going to link to an awesome blog post you've written about 10 Google Classroom tips for remote learning. But I want to kind of bring it up to date, bring it to, November 2020 time period and say, okay, what are you seeing right now as the top issues of using Google Classroom for remote or hybrid learning?
The top issue really has to do with the experience level and so many teachers who had never used it before. And even some of my close friends who were just kind of thrown into the fire and texting me, Kasey, how do I do this? There's just so many features they don't know because they haven't used it. So I think really the biggest issue is just having that training and that skill set so that they're not spending all their time just learning those new skills and learning that they can use it to do things in a different way, that it doesn't have to be everything is whole class, everything is synchronous, that we can use this to differentiate and to personalize learning more for our students.
And when we talk about SAMR, we're really talking about getting to redefinition and not just substitution. I mean, isn't that one thing that, I've seen that when we did with remote learning, everybody's just saying, okay, this is what I did last week in the classroom. I'm just going to do it online. And that doesn't really work, does it?
No. And I've been saying that for so long, especially since the shutdown, that we can't replicate the school day in an online environment. Like, we have to just think completely differently about everything that we do. That's one of my pet peeves too, is because I get asked all the time, how do I put my worksheet in Google Classroom? And usually I want to come back and say, okay, what is it you're trying to do? Because there's probably a better way to do that with technology that's going to save you time and be even easier than just trying to get that PDF uploaded where you want it to go.
So you've just shared one pet peeve. If there is one thing that you could just wave your magic wand and change about how schools are expecting teachers to use Google Classroom, what would it be?
I think one of my biggest pet peeves about what's happening in this moment is the mandates coming from administration about logging seat time and interactions and having sort of that micromanagement piece where, the principals are also added as co-teachers in the classrooms watching every single move, which Lord help us, that's not trusting your teachers to do what's best for your kids, that there's things that we can do and we can facilitate in an online environment that just work differently, that we can't track in the same ways that we did. And so I was really upset. In fact, I kind of went on a rant a few weeks ago on my podcast.
Yes, I heard.
And that's not like me to do that. Like, I don't normally get angry and negative, but I was angry. I was angry for what people were saying about teachers and how teachers have been treated so unfairly, and the way that everybody's sticking Band-Aids on the situation right now, because I truly believe we are in a turning point in education and that things will never be the same again. And I hope that's in a good way. I feel like this is the opportunity that we have before us to make some of the changes that we've needed in education for so many decades.
Well, and with every change, I've taught my students for years as we study change, is that there's victims and there's victors. There's winners and losers. But let's shift to the kids, because that's who cannot afford to lose. We know that there are some schools and some education institutions that will not survive past this time because they're not doing it very well. But we have all these kids at home, and some are just disengaged, and some may never re-engage again. What can we do?
I think that, again, is about finding those ways to build community online, to connect with those kids, putting time in your schedule to talk to your students one-on-one, to have those conferences, to have those breakout rooms. It's not as easy as it is in a face-to-face environment to build that classroom culture and to build that community. And we have to prioritize that, because the rest of it won't work until we have that. That's kind of foundational for the classroom. If they don't know you, if they don't know your faces, if kids are just clicking mute and turning their camera off, then we're really kind of sunk if we can't make those connections and find out what's going on with those kids, both personally and academically, to make sure that we are building that community and using tools like Google Classroom or Meet or Zoom or whatever it is to have those personal conversations with students. So private comments in Google Classroom is one of my favorite features in Google Classroom. I think it might be one of the most powerful features because it does allow us to have that one-on-one conversation with a student and making sure that students understand how that works. And coming back to make those connections, whether we have synchronous time where we get to see them, but also letting go of the idea that everybody in the class has to do the exact same thing at the exact same time. That synchronous online learning, having a kid sit in front of a screen for 8 hours a day, is detrimental to everyone. I think we've all experienced the fact that Zoom fatigue is a legit thing. I mean, it will exhaust you. So we have to think differently. And I do believe there's a lot more power in creating some asynchronous activities, and Google Classroom allows us to do that, to post videos, to have those conversations, to schedule those meetings in Google Meet, and to even build in some activities with other tools like Flipgrid. Flipgrid has been one of my favorite tools during this whole experience.
Why?
Because it is asynchronous and because it's easy to use. It's easy to log in with your Google account or your Microsoft account. And there's so many things that you can do with it. So it is video-based response tool, but they've added tons of new features. So you can respond in other ways. It just lets us make those connections when we can't get the same synchronous connections that we're making via, 30 kids all in a Google Meet. Makes it a little more personalized. I feel like that we can have students responding and reflecting. It's an absolute fantastic reflection tool, and being able to show their work. And it might be on paper. A lot of teachers are still struggling, especially in math. Like, how do I get my equations into Google Classroom? Well, it doesn't necessarily mean that everything has to be digital. We just got to think about documenting it in other ways. Like Catlin Tucker said, think of it like you're creating a documentary of your learning when you're not doing it in that online environment. I thought that's a fabulous way to think of it. Take your picture or use Flipgrid and put up your work in front of the camera. Making those connections, but also getting students to talk about their learning is so powerful.
Yes, and there's so many tools, Equatio, or get a dry erase board and let everybody have one and they can use it. I mean, there's just so many ways that we can engage, but it is different. And I'm in several online Facebook groups, and there was a teacher the other day that posted something that I think is a frustration for a lot of teachers. And she said, "What do? I was forwarded a TikTok video of my student cheating on my test. I know that they're being dishonest. What do I do?" And, that is one thing that I think a lot of educators are seeing, is that a traditional assessment seems to be, it's never okay to cheat, but I am going to use the word inviting academic dishonesty in a massive way that when we return back to the face-to-face classroom, I'm afraid we're going to see that a lot of kids actually don't understand certain things.
This is actually something I've been talking about for a long time. And the fact that we have so many assignments that we oftentimes repeat year after year. So even if it's not something they find online, they're using their siblings' work and turning that in as their own. Or now that everything's online, everybody's like, well, how do I know they're not just opening another tab? Well, we have to think differently about our assignments. And we have to think of ways that we can get students to create more original work, to have them reflect on their learning, to give them student choice, whether that's a choice of tool or topic or reading or whatever it is, to build those pieces in so that we're not doing these cookie cutter assignments anymore. And even with assessment, it's not just finding that multiple choice test. I think this goes back to what Alan November said so many years ago, creating questions that aren't Googleable, that aren't going to show up at the top of a Google search, that you have to actually dig and learn something in order to answer the question. We have to ask better questions.
Absolutely. And have unique projects that are unique and personalized to the individual child. I mean, I've been teaching Google Sheets. I said, you have $10,000 to take you and a friend anywhere in the world. You've got to create your budget. You've got to have a contingency fund. You've got to have all the formulas in the sheet. And then you've also got to have live charts that go straight into Google Slides. And they've had a blast and learned it. That's not something you can really Google.
No, project-based learning like you do in your classroom is another fantastic way. And I think we should all be doing more project-based learning as opposed to just this one and done idea, and giving students these opportunities to do things. But you have to build that up too. Like, kind of going back to that culture and community. If you don't have the right culture and community and students are just used to the one and done, the static assignments that they've been doing since they started school, then they're going to flounder. So we have to find those facilitation points so that we can have the touch points with our students, to talk to them, to support them, and help make sure they're on the right track. Because I think a lot of students are also getting lost in this process and giving up. That things are too much, too confusing, and they feel like they can get away with it a little bit more right now. And some of them probably are. That, again, that's why it's so important that we find those ways to have those touch points with students.
Well, as we finish up, you probably have the most authentic or 2020 name, Shake Up Learning, because that is what has and is happening. So what I'd like you to do is fill in this blank. Teachers everywhere, if you remember one thing, I hope you remember blank.
I hope teachers remember how important they are in this moment, and to not let the situation or what people are saying get you down or drive you out of the profession, because we need good teachers. And I know so many good teachers who are choosing to jump ship in this moment. And now is the time for us to band together and to use our voices to speak up for what's best for kids. If our administration is not doing the thing that we think is best, then we need to offer better suggestions. So that was probably like 12 things in your blank. But like I said, I'm defending my teachers right now so much that they are just being put through the ringer, and I don't want to lose them. So hang in there, y'all. You got this.
And when you're on your break, there's a great book, A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And he was a psychologist in a Nazi concentration camp. It's a fantastic book. It's always what I read when I'm going through struggles. But he said, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And we do have a choice. How are we going to face it? Sometimes I think we have to get rid of a little bit of a sense of perfection and say, okay, this is well enough. But we can't let these children fall. We have to love them, reach them. And I think, Kasey, your advice to reach out one-on-one is the best advice teachers could listen to right now.
I love that quote that you just shared too. And that really rings so true in this moment. And it's funny how so many things that we've been talking about for the last several years have come to a boiling point in this moment where they make more sense, and everyone is beginning to see the importance of these transitions. But we also have to hang on to this and see this as the opportunity that we have to do important change in education.
Yes, so thank you, Kasey. And again, the 2 books that are coming out, Blended Learning with Google and Google from A to Z by Kasey Bell. Thanks, Kasey.
Thank you so much, Vicki.
While Google Classroom is great, there are a few things missing. Admin teams are now wanting better analytics. Students say they need everything on one page so they can get one quick view of their tasks. And teachers, we desperately need better monitoring. All of this is possible with the Hapara Instructional Suite that organizes teaching and learning workflows in G Suite and Google Classroom seamlessly. Go to hapara.com/CoolCatTeacher. That's HAPARA.com/CoolCatTeacher to learn more about how Hapara can get your students and teachers the help and support that they need.